Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Semantic Data Governance for GDPR Compliance. I would like to start today's presentation by introducing you to the speakers. We have Jack Spivak, and Jack is a Semantic Solutions Architect with TopQuadrant. We also have Natasa Veritimo, and Natasa is a Semantic Data Modeler with TopQuadrant. In today's webinar, Jack will begin with an overview introducing GDPR requirements and the steps needed for implementing them. Natasa will then demonstrate capabilities that TopBraid EDG provides for ensuring GDPR compliance. And just to cover a few logistical items before we get started today, please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, just look on the right-hand side control panel and you should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during today's presentation. And then we will address those at the end of the webinar. We also have included a few polling questions throughout today's presentation and we'll appreciate any feedback on those. We will also be recording today's webinar and we'll send a link to that recorded version. With that, I will hand it over to Jack to get us started. Jack?
Great. Thank you, Christy. Let's move right into today's program about semantic data governance and GDPR. A few words first about TopQuadrant. We believe that capturing the meaning of information is essential, and it's our strong commitment to standard-based approaches to data semantics that makes this possible. Our mission simply is to make enterprise information meaningful. And in today's webinar, we're going to describe how technologies for managing meaningful relationships in enterprise information can help speed, ensure, and achieve compliance with GDPR. We work with many large clients and government agencies, and we bring substantial experience and approaches that help design enterprise infrastructure that meets regulatory requirements. Our systems are in use in many sectors: oil and gas, manufacturing, medicine, life sciences, and financial services has become an especially significant focus for us recently because of the increasing complexity of compliance requirements. As Christy mentioned, I am going to start with a few words about GDPR. And because we have such a mixed audience, some of you may be hearing about this for the first time, and others already deeply involved in the details of your own compliance programs. I'm going to take a moment just to get us on the same page. The fact is, we all have personal information that we share. We leave our digital fingerprints, our preferences, and our life stories really everywhere that we travel on our computers and mobile devices. The General Data Protection Regulations adopted by the EU protect us from unintentional and intentional misuse of personally identifiable information. GDPR is a broad and complex mandate. These regulations apply in general to the personal data of all EU residents and companies operating in the EU. Beyond simply securing data, GDPR requires systems actually to find, protect, track, audit, and assess the security of PII. And finally, full compliance is required by May of 2018. GDPR's 7 overarching principles guide consent, fairness, accuracy, and accountability to establish what's essentially a standard of care for personal data. System integrators, law firms, consultants, and others have said a lot about this, and plenty of great references are available. But in this webinar, we hope to add something quite unique and valuable to the conversation. I want to share with you how current technology in graph representation and semantic data governance helps to solve the hard problems in GDPR compliance. Natasa will be demonstrating several of these examples in TopBraid EDG, our semantic data governance solution. As you can see here, GDPR is not something we can ignore. Very severe financial penalties are possible, but even worse, violations can put your entire business model at risk. enforcement actions can prohibit processing the very data that drives revenues. Before I dig into this complexity, I'm going to ask Christy's help to get a sense of where we are as a group on our GDPR roadmaps.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Go ahead and post that polling question. We wanted to have a better understanding of what stage you were in with understanding and complying with GDPR. So if you'll just take a second to answer select one of the following: just becoming aware of GDPR, understanding its applicability and scope for your company, researching and planning how to comply, evaluating processes and tools to assist in complying, or in process of implementing tools to become compliant. So everyone will just take a minute and choose one of those responses. I see those coming in. Let's just give another couple seconds, Jack, and we'll close the poll and share the results. Okay, great. So most of you are researching and planning how to comply, which is not surprising. So that's great. Thank you so much for taking the time to respond. And Jack, you want to continue?
Yeah, great, Christy, thanks. Complying with GDPR is hard because personal information is complex and touches every level of very complex businesses. And on this slide, you see one example of why. There's enormous variety in the types of personal data, in the roles in which we generate it, and where it's found. But that's not all. There are other reasons why this is difficult, and one of them lies in the complexity of the questions we have to answer. With varying perspectives, different users need to know different things in order to fulfill their roles in GDPR compliance. Even more difficult, there's multiple levels involved in this problem, from individual data to entire systems that are involved. There are unknowns to design for, with evolving regulations, new data offerings, and new partnering models. We may never make this simple, but we know we have to make it simpler to reduce the cost of complying and the risks of failure. So we get that it's complex, but even this complexity really doesn't capture the whole picture. I'm going to talk now about what it is that's really so hard about data protection and how we can solve these hard problems. The hard part is really that the data complexity is not just about the data. More significantly, it's about the flow of the data and about the situations in which the data finds itself. GDPR regulations apply differently in different situations. We need a simple answer, but it's not about finding the data and locking it up. We need to be able to address or talk about a chain of relationships, because GDPR compliance isn't just about the data. GDPR is all about how things are related to each other and where the data flows. So here you can see a simple example of how relationships connect personal data, like the customer name here on the left, to processes like software applications, and situations like transporting this data outside the EU, all the way to specific GDPR regulations. Technology exists to make discovering this chain of relationship easier. Graph-based data representation is a technology that represents both your data and chains of relationships like these. I want to emphasize that simple chains are rarely enough to represent networks of regulations and accountability. Personal information requires us to track many patterns of regulatory relationships with different types of regulatory things. Graph representations allow that. And even more important, graphs enable us to manage unknown complexity by simply adding new things and relationships easily. Because when new regulations or new partners suddenly appear, these new connections expose personal information and impact compliance. If you already understand graphs, please bear with me for a moment as I jump to a very high-level overview of how graphs can capture this meaning. Promise I'll be getting back to the practical detail of how we do this in TopBraid EDG in just a few minutes. Graph-based data representations tame complexity by making relationship as important as the things they connect, and by making both of these machine readable. You saw that multiple things and relationships describe a path from personal information to regulations. Well, graphs are just extended networks of these things and relationships. TopBraid EDG uses relationships in pre-built graphs to directly capture the meaning and information needed for compliance. Well, why do we care so much about relationship? Because knowing all of what relates to our situations is exactly what allows us to understand the actions needed for compliance and whether or not we've taken them. Graphs allow us to talk with precision about how personal information is connected and about what this means. Well, if that's true, what is it that we need to talk about? There's a lot. There are actions in which personal data is involved, and there's obligations to consider. And these are just a few examples of the many activities that GDPR regulates. Any GDPR compliance system must be designed to track and account for how personally identifiable information relates to each of these activities. Again, it's all about relationships. So how do we do this capturing of the meaning? That's where semantic graphs come in. Semantics is about capturing meaning to make it available for good decision making. It does this simply and flexibly, just like ordinary sentences do. Semantics describes the things that we care about and how they relate to each other. Things and relationships. The meaning lives or is captured in the relationships. It's just like language, and in fact, it is language, and having a common language makes communication possible. Semantic standards enable a common language. Today, as a result of a 15-year effort by the W3C, a collection of standards enable the capture and communication of meaning needed for GDPR compliance. How? These W3C standards stack together in a system that allows us to say things, to share a common vocabulary for saying them, to meaningfully organize the things that we are saying, to be able to ask about what's been said, and finally, to verify all of this with rules. These standards afford interoperability, collaboration, consistency, and data portability for GDPR compliance. And this is really good because GDPR actually requires data portability. So that's as much of an overview as I can share in this short time about how these very capable technologies enable GDPR compliance in general. This is actually a good spot to pause. I'm going to hand it back to you, Christy, for another quick poll.
Great, thank you, Jack. Jack has given us a high-level overview of graph representations, but we would like to know how familiar you are with graph representations and their capabilities. So if you can just take 1 second and select one of the followings. You're not at all familiar, you've heard of them and want to know more, you have an understanding of their applicability and benefits, your organization is actively exploring their use, or you work with them and know their capabilities. So we'll just give a couple of seconds. Looks like we're good to go, Jack. So if you want to share those results. Oh, great. So at least all of you have at least heard of them, and most of you are actually working with them. So that's great. Thank you so much. Jack, you want to continue?
You bet. I promised to get back to the detail, and I'm going to dig into that now. How does TopBraid EDG use graph representation and semantic standards in GDPR compliance? I'm privileged to be on the team tackling exactly this problem at TopQuadrant. And in TopBraid EDG, we created pre-built, foundational, standardized graph representations so that you don't have to. In this example, you can see a small segment of a graph representing the complexity of regulation and the regulatory compliance concepts in general. And you see here things like a regulation. There are articles of law that stipulate these regulations. There's regulated parties and regulated activities. It's all about regulation itself. Here, we have a second graph. And this graph similarly is an excerpt, but it's about GDPR regulation and GDPR concepts in particular. GDPR is more specific than regulation in general. And you see here things like the notion of a GDPR regulated process and GDPR regulated activities like transmission outside the EU. This is where the rubber really meets the road. These conceptual graphs are built into the TopBraid Edge platform, and they're available for use, as Natasha will show you next. This image is from that same graph you were looking at, but actually in the product itself. Finally, this third graph is a governance graph in which we represent the relationships necessary to connect your own enterprise information, processes, resources, to the previous two regulatory and GDPR graphs. And the power of TopBraid Edge is that we bring all of this together into a connected knowledge base that can be queried for insights, reports, and decision support. We're about to launch into the demo, so I want to offer this one last slide to help orient you a bit. The slide is complex, and you don't have to read it all now. That's the substance of the demo. But focusing on just these large blue boxes for a moment, all you have to remember is that we're going to be demoing how complex chains of connection can be followed all the way from first, the data elements here on the left, through second, the situations that involve them, to third, the regulatory obligations that govern these situations, and finally, all the way to the fourth, actual text of law that can be stipulating the regulations. There's more detail, but with that, I'll turn it over to you, Natasha.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Hope you can see my screen. Let me first orient you a bit in our environment. What you see here is the homepage of TopBraid Edge. Edge is an agile data governance environment where you can centralize the collection and distribution of the different types of your organization assets. You can see these collections of assets here in your left. Certainly, your organization contains data. Data asset collections can be used to describe all your data elements, your databases, tables, columns, views. For GDPR compliance, you need to identify and classify your data elements. And let me show you some examples of data assets. Here, for example, we see a list, and I can click on one. And here we see a database table, and we can also see some information around it. For example, we can see what are its columns, and we can navigate and see more information about this column. Here in this list, you can see all the different types of data assets that you can model here, that you can describe here. We see the tables, the columns, the views, but you can also describe your logical data models, the entities, the attributes, and how these map to the tables and the columns of the actual schemas of your actual databases. Let me go back to Edge now. Here in technical assets, we describe everything that has to do with infrastructure. Business applications, servers, ETL jobs, store procedures, scripts, and most importantly, their inputs and their outputs. For GDPR compliance, you need to know not only what your data is, but also how this data flows in your applications or in your ETL jobs. Let's see some examples here. of technical assets. Here we see some applications. I can click in one and I see that this is a Scala software program, and these are its inputs. As I can see, they are database tables, columns, and here are the outputs that are reports. Enterprise assets. In enterprise assets, we capture the information of the business processes, the activities, the functions. For GDPR, we need to know the purpose of the use of the data. For which business activity do we use this data? Let's see an example here. So we have a business activity marketing that has a sub-activity engaged marketing firm. And this uses a business function, and we probably have a model that describes the reports and the applications that produce, that support this business function. All these collections are connected together as Jack described. Today, we are going to focus on compliance assets and show you how you can use all this interconnected data from data assets, from enterprise and technical assets, how you can use all this interconnected data to identify compliance with different regulations, and more specifically GDPR. Compliance assets are all about regulations, language of GDPR, forms, compliance procedures, and documents that you might need. For our demo today, we will use an example compliance asset that we have named Top Bank Corp, which brings together data sets that we can find in the banking domain. And let's go into our production copy. Okay. We will base our demo on a user story. Let's suppose I'm a data protection officer and I have identified that I have a data element that I want to mark as personal identifiable information, PII. This data element could be a database column, could be a logical attribute, it might be even a column in a report. But for today's demo, let's take a database column, the database column customer name from the table customer. Search for that. Okay. This is my database column and I have several information around it, and I will push the edit button to go and mark it as PII. As you see here, I have all the available information, all the available metadata that I can have around database columns. Of course, I can always configure what metadata I want to display. Maybe, for example, I want to display different metadata for different user groups. But for now, all I want to do is mark an element as PII, and I set this to true, and probably give some other information about my element. I can put some criticality level. I want to show you, though, that the values that I select are always taken from control drop-down lists. We call them control vocabularies. These are not plain strings that someone can type. Maybe I can explain that later. I will just put a value now, but just remember that control vocabularies are important, and later on maybe we'll explain why. I will just have here medium criticality for now. I could select an encryption method, but I want to do it here because a column, a database column, might be encrypted, might be obfuscated in one application, but it might not be encrypted in another one. But probably I want to put a personal data category, and different obligations derive from different categories. For example, genetic data or biometric data. These are subject to more stringent conditions under GDPR. So we have to choose a category. For now, I will just take the personal one. Okay, general personal one. And I think that is enough for now. I can just save my changes. And I have marked my data element as PII. Okay, so up until now, I have covered what many GDPR practitioners call bottom-up approach. I have described all my data elements, metadata around them. We have also identified the PII ones and the relevant properties for GDPR. However, in regulation compliance, in GDPR specifically, that is not enough. The bottom-up approach is not enough. The same data can be used in different applications and for different purposes, so they will be under different GDPR obligations. So we also need to have a top-down approach, an approach where we identify the processes that my data participate. For example, this database column here is input in several applications here, as I see. Java is an example, is one of them. We have to identify for which business purpose, where does these processes take place, and who is accessing it. In short, in GDPR compliance, obligations depend on the situation that my data finds itself in. It depends on what we call situated process. And let's see some example of situated process. Okay, here I see 5 situated process. I can pick one. So we see that we have a situated process that transmits data outside EU from Greece to Norway, and it's accessed by a third-party company. But maybe it's better if we see this situated process in a visualized way to understand why my database column customer name found itself in this situation. I have my visualization ready so we can see the data. So that is my situated process that was traveling from, that was transmitting information from Greece to Norway. And as we saw, there was an application that was participating in this situated process. This application, though, had as input several database columns. My customer name is one of them. And since this Java application was part of the situated process, all its PII data that are input in this application find itself in this situated process too. And let's go back and examine again the situated process in the form way. Okay, so let's navigate and see more information about my software, my Java program. Okay, as we see, we had several input columns. One of them is the customer name, and another one is customer race. If you see these columns are obfuscated by a specific encryption method. You remember we said that we didn't want to put the encryption method on the data column itself, but we wanted to put it as it flows in specific application. In this application, it is encrypted, for example. We can also see that this application supports a specific business function to deliver some customer data in a marketing firm. And let's see more data on the situated process. Okay, this situated process transmits data from Greece to Norway. These values are taken from control vocabularies. These, as we said, are not plain strings, things that someone can type wrong or differently. Control vocabularies are all about things and relationships, as Jack described, rich structures on their own right. For example, we must know which countries are in EU. I can see that Greece is part of Europe and it's part of EU, but Norway is not. It's part of Europe, but not part of the European Union. Only certain things can have certain relationships. Control vocabularies allow us to have things and relationships right. That way, they can facilitate integration and information discovery. Now I can go back to my situated process and I have all the information I need. in place. I have combined the bottom-up approach, where I had described all my data, with a top-down approach from the business processes. I know all my data, which ones are PII, where do they flow, who is accessing it and where. So that gives me all I need to know to define my obligations and permissions based on the GDPR directive. In TopBraid EDG, we have gone a step further though, and we have created a knowledge-based engine that, based on this structured data, the structured information, identifies automatically my GDPR permissions, conditions, obligations, even the forms and the documents that I will need. And let's see what this is all about. I can go and run this knowledge-based engine. Let's remember that I have 5 situated processes here, and in this one, the one with the customer name, I have 5 information items. So I can run my knowledge-based engine. Okay, I see that the knowledge-based engine has generated 188 new information items. Let's see what this is all about. Okay, so I have more situated processes now, something called hosting, which I didn't have before, but let me go first into the one that we were examining before, and I will come back to these ones. Okay, so we were in the situated process where my Java application was transmitting data outside the EU. As you see now, I have a new information item that says that my situated process is subject to permissions under conditions, but also to some obligations under the EU directive. I can click in one. Let me click in this demonstration of consent and see more information about this obligation. For example, I can see that it is stipulated by a specific paragraph in the GDPR directive. And I can see also that it has some required resources. So so it has some required documents. Actually, in this document procedure, we describe for the DPO what are the procedure that he needs to follow when he has transmission to third countries, to countries outside the EU. And we also provide forms that he might need to use. For example, a form to be signed by the data subject to give consent to use his personal data. And you actually can download the form from here. I don't think I need to do it now. Okay. So maybe we can see this also in a visualized way. Okay. This was the situated process, and we were before in the other neighborgram we explained this part, the left part, how the database column are input in the situated process, while the green things you see here are actually the obligations that were generated from the knowledge-based engine. And here we see this demonstration of consent and the documents that we might need, and also that it is stipulated from paragraph 7, that it's coming from Article 7, from Chapter 2 of the GDPR directive. Actually, we have the whole GDPR directive described in a structured way here in EDGE. Okay, let me go back now to situated processes and see what are the new things that the knowledge-based engine discovered. The knowledge-based engine crawled this data and discovered some new processes, situated processes. Actually, I see that it discovered that we have situated processes because this is a relational database, because a relational database was provided as a service and it was hosted outside EU. So all the PII database columns that I had marked as such in this relational database find themselves now in a situation that they need they have some obligations under GDPR. Let's see that in a visualized way too. So this is my new situated process here. Okay, so this situated process is because there was a hosting in a relational database in United States. And this relational database included some tables. We can see here the tables. And one of these tables, this customer table, includes customer database column. So all these data, if they were marked as PII, they found themselves in situations that they are under the GDPR obligations. This knowledge-based engine is actually a set of rules that run on the structured interconnected data. And these rules are written with open W3C standards, so you can see them, you can change them, or you can create your own rules depending on your business needs or after discussion with your lawyers. Based on this interconnected data, this knowledge graph, you can search also for any kind of information. For example, you can say, give me all the data elements that contain PII information. Let me show you that. Okay. So give me all the ones that are marked as PII. And I can see here a list with all the PII data. So let's summarize what we saw in the demo today. First, we saw how to use a data governance tool, TopBraid EDG, to describe and monitor all your data elements. Then we saw how to use EDG to capture all your business processes and data processes and the flows and metadata around them. Finally, we saw how you can use the knowledge-based engine to crawl this interconnected data and identify automatically the GDPR obligations that derive from your data and processes. And that was all from me, and now I turn it back to Jack. Jack?
Thanks, Natasha. And Natasha, can you see my slide?
Yes, I can.
That's great. Thanks very much, Natasha. Natasha is responsible for actually building the GDPR extensions to TopBraid EDG and for the knowledge engine that she just demonstrated for you. And I'm going to summarize what she just said again, but at a bit of a higher level. She's shown you how TopBraid EDG brings a knowledge base to answer complex questions like the ones here on this slide. Who are my data partners? Where are they? Where is the data living? Maybe what third country jurisdictions have regulatory authority? Ultimately, questions like these show that GDPR compliance is really about situations and connecting the dots for data governance and control of personal data. I want to emphasize that this idea of using graph technology to connect the dots is not just based on our perspective alone. Graph-based data representations emphasizing relationship have matured in highly visible solutions to very hard problems. Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, PayPal, all of these use their own implementations of graph technologies to drive their user interfaces, their experience, and their offerings. And this is especially true in the challenging financial regulatory sphere. The Enterprise Data Management Council has taken a strong position that semantic engineering and graph technologies offer a solution for the governance, infrastructure, and quality requirements mandated by a wide range of regulations. You can see some of them here on the right, and as you can see, GDPR is among these challenges. This knowledge base that you've seen Natasha demo enables you to understand how critical aspects of various enterprise contexts relate to your compliance activities. And finally, the pre-built models that I mentioned in TopBraid Edge speed the capture of organization-specific knowledge needed for GDPR compliance. You saw how we can tag PII, but also the metadata that's available shows you about usage, intentions, system structure, etc. And finally, you saw how TopBraid Edge's knowledge engine applies rules to help automate a variety of required GDPR compliance activities and assessments. Christy, I think we have one final poll.
Yes, Jack, thank you. You can go ahead and post that now. We'd like to understand, what are your biggest challenges in becoming GDPR compliant? So if you could just take a quick look and select one or more of the following: understanding GDPR and its applicability to your company, addressing the many use cases needed to comply, planning for the roles, people, the tasks, and processes needed, evaluating and implementing technology or systems, or deploying solutions that enable data protection by design. So we'll just take a couple more seconds, Jack, where it looks like folks are still coming in with their votes. Okay, Jack, you can go ahead and post those results. Oh, so we're pretty much all over the place, but it looks like a large majority of you are planning for roles, people, tasks, and processes. So thank you so much for taking the time to answer our polling questions today. Jack, do you want to take it back?
You bet. So we've shared quite a bit here about the details of personal data protection. I want to close today's webinar with a broader perspective. Article 25 of the GDPR, data protection by design and default, requires something quite a bit larger. I've excerpted some key points here, and as you can see, it really requires governance. Article 25 requires controllers specifically to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures, and Natasha demonstrated that TopBraid Enterprise Data Governance provides such measures. Edge handles compliance cases like these specifically because it's not just a tool. It's a complete pre-built semantic data governance framework. Edge models, features, and capabilities provide the coverage, the flexibility, and the insight needed for governing effective GDPR compliance programs. We agree with the Enterprise Data Management Council that complex data problems like GDPR can be solved using semantic engineering and infrastructures built on graph representations. How do we provide these capabilities in Edge? TopBraid Edge uses the simple notion of assets that Natasha introduced to capture and organize diverse enterprise metadata. This includes tagging of personally identifiable information, but much more. Edge maps the diversity of your organization's information assets to this rich standardized data model. And these mappings organize your information conveniently to help build your unique compliance program. And because each program is unique, mappings can be easily extended or customized as needed with the packages that you see here on the left. We've shown you just a few of TopBraid Edge's features because this obviously is a pretty limited focus. But beyond what you've seen, there's a rich feature set with collaboration, audit and change control, notifications, workflow management, data quality controls, and much more. You can see quite a few of them here on the slide. Don't expect you to read them. We will be providing these slides to you in a follow-up email, so just know that this is available. TopBraid Edge features and capabilities support a broad range of use cases in governance and compliance. And I'm going to mention just one overarching capability in closing because it's so important. With so much focus on what's inside, you might wonder, will Edge be yet another data silo? TopBrald products are designed from the ground up to avoid this problem. In fact, it's the whole point of our products. We're designed to integrate with other business systems. And this is a complex slide. Again, I don't expect you to read it all, but I'm showing this simply to share that everything you've seen so far in TopBrald Edge is not only available in the user interface. This large red repository here in the center of the screen holds the information, and Edge is specifically designed to distribute the information saved in the central repository. We have many common input and output formats available for data exchange, and all of this data is available for bulk import and export. But even more important, it's also directly available in real time through web services and other methods. It's not possible to go into all the detail of this right now. Please contact us. We'd love to explore how to best support your environment and needs for integration. Just to summarize, here are the benefits that Edge offers that support GDPR compliance programs. Specifically, Edge is a full data governance framework, and it offers flexibility and extensibility because of semantic standards. Because of these standards, we can talk about any types of things and relationships that are needed. We can connect your personal information and regulated activities with your policies and enforcement. Because of graph technology, we can actually map anything to anything, and you've seen that. Finally, Edge minimizes what you have to understand, design, and create, because pre-built enterprise and regulatory compliance models reduce the cost of doing this and the speed of your compliance. Finally, TopBrald Edge helps you understand GDPR exposures and your compliance status. Connections enable complex queries for meaningful insights. That finishes what we have to share today about semantic data governance for GDPR and Edge. I'm going to turn the podium back to you, Christy, and you can manage our question and answer session.
Great. Thank you, Jack. And thanks everyone for submitting your questions. If you haven't already done so, you can still submit questions and discussion points in the question box located in the right-hand side control panel. So still, feel free to go ahead and do that, but we'll get started. I notice here we have a question that we often hear on webinars and in general. So maybe we can start with this one, Natasha. The question is, how do you get the data into TopBrald Edge?
Okay. I think we had this question, yes, in the first webinar also. Okay, so if you already use TopBrald Edge for data governance, then most of the information is already in the environment, and you just need to annotate certain information as PII, as we showed at the beginning. But if you haven't used Edge before, when you actually now starting to put in place a data governance tool to describe your data and flow, then in that case, we offer many importers. For example, we have JDBC importers. We import from DDL files. We offer importers from JSON or CSV. And for them, we also offer some templates. Actually, the data that I have used for this demo, I imported them from a CSV. I think I have it opened here, from this CSV, and I can show you how I imported it. I can just go to compliance assets, create a new compliance asset. Okay, and I go import based on standard template, and I import my CSV. And here it is. Let's go and see what it created. It was here in the demo. Okay. Situated process. So I imported the CSV, and I have these 5 now situated process that I didn't have before. In general, our product strong point is its integration capabilities. And in many projects, they have actually used Edge exactly as an integration environment between their other systems. Maybe Jack, maybe it would be useful if you could show again the slide you have with web services. Can you do that? Yeah.
Sure, Natasha. Give me just 1 sec to grab that.
Sure.
Yeah, is this the slide you're referring to?
Yes, yes, with the web services, yes.
Okay, great. Do you want to talk to this, or do you want me to say a few words again?
You say.
Okay.
You say it better.
Okay. Natasha mentioned the integration with other systems. I pointed out this slide before. Here, going into just a little more detail than I did when you saw it last, you can see that we have, she showed you one import format for CSV. We have several spreadsheet import formats, but we can also do this import from other structured formats like the RDF semantic formats that some of you may be familiar with. But also XML, we do this on the fly, so we can do this live. And we can hook directly to relational databases using JDBC connections. And then there's some systems that have specific outputs that we can use as our inputs. Calibra does this. You can see IBM business glossaries, variety of products we integrate with. Similarly, over here on the right, you can see that we export as well in a variety of formats. But it's actually, we feel that it's our web services that really help distinguish the product, because your in-house third-party systems, you may have data warehouses, you may have applications like some that Natasha's shown, can actually make direct web service calls to everything that's in the Edge repository. Absolutely all the data you put in here is directly available through web services. Some of these exist and they're prepackaged with the product if you want to query the data, and we have the capability to custom make web services wherever they're needed for custom integrations. If I could, I want to expand just a second on what you were saying there, Natasha, because it's really significant. Natasha mentioned the technical aspect of getting data into the product, but beyond that, it's something that we hear really often is not just about how do I get the data into the product, but how can I even find the information needed to collect and identify what's relevant to GDPR in order to bring it into Edge. This is certainly going to be every organization's unique challenge, the responsibility. But with every data governance challenge, which GDPR compliance certainly is, the combination of people, processes, and technical tools are going to be needed. We've shown you already how TopBraid Edge provides comprehensive data governance capabilities and import methodologies. But beyond this, something we haven't shown you is that the identification and capture of this information requires collaboration and social networking types of communication and processes within an organization. Edge provides many capabilities for collaboration. We have team comments that can be passed back and forth, and tasks that can be assigned, and there's a what we call a RACI matrix, responsibility, accountability, that can be assigned for all these notifications and actually used to drive the notification framework. All of these collaboration tools allow and encourage the people who are most familiar with the data to be participating in and help driving the identification and the collection process. We're very committed to the notion of governance as a collaborative process. And we're even exploring automated technologies as well, using modern social construction methods that can allow Edge to drive what you might call a crowdsourcing of the knowledge that already exists in your organization. Maybe that was a little too much. Give it back to you, Christy, and we can have another question.
Okay, great. Natasha, I think we have a couple of minutes left, so hopefully we can address this question. How can Edge help in cases of data breaches?
Okay, big issue, data breach. Okay, based on this interconnected data, you can trace everything that it is affected from a potential breach. Maybe it's better if I explain, if I use a lineagegram, if I use a visualization method to explain it. I will pick one. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. And I will create a lineagegram. Let's suppose that we have found out that we have a breach in an application, this Scala application here. So I can see, this is my Scala application, the one with the red. I can see in this lineagegram, what are, you see here in this box that says inputs, what are the input data in this application. I can see everything around this application actually. So not only I can see what is being used in this application, but I can also see the downstream things that are affected, that are being touched from this application. Maybe the breach is in a report. For example, here is a report. If my breach was in the report, again, I can see all the data that has fed this report. And that way, the data protection officer becomes aware that what are the data that were involved in the breach, and he can see if they were PII, and he can, we said that we have an unlimited query capability based on this interconnected data, and he can query them and create the reports. Maybe I should have shown you that you, from all these queries, you can export them as reports in different structural formats. Is that enough as an answer for now? It's a big issue. I don't think I can cover it.
I think that's pretty much all the time we have, Natasa. So everyone, if you did submit a question, we will be responding to those questions via an email response after today's webinar. So be on the lookout for that. We will also be providing a link to the recorded presentation as well as to the slides. And I hope that you found today's information valuable, and we really appreciate and thank everyone for your attention and your interest, and hope that you have a great day. Thank you so much.